Thank You Scientists are an important band for me. I mean, obviously, I love them enough to want to comb through their discography and pick out my favorites, something I wouldn't do for most bands, but also because they're the band that single-handedly reignited my passion for music roughly 5 years ago after a few years of diminishing interests. I got Maps of Non-Existent Places at the start of 2015, and it was one of the most defining aspects of my last semester of college. Lots of memories attached to that one, for sure. I charted the whole thing in Guitar Hero even. I was that into it. I don't know if I've ever been quite as into any album since then. But yeah, Thank You Scientist. One of the leading names in prog in the back half of the 2010s, at least from my perspective. 7 band members, each performing a different instrument, to create an addictive fusion of jazz, prog rock, and metal, tied together with some really strong pop sensibilities. Music that can be as fun as it can be catchy or crushingly powerful, often at the same time. They've just struck upon a winning formula that makes it hard for them to do any wrong, and even their quote-unquote weakest tracks are still solid at worst. And I'm hyped as hell to talk about them. We're doing a top 12 again because, well, heck, it's tradition now, isn't it? So, without further ado, the top 12 best Thank You Scientist songs. Kicking things off with... This song, and the song that was the very last cut from this list, Need More Input, are two very different songs on the whole, but both were as high up as they were for basically the same reason. That being, good songs on the whole that have one, or in Need More Input's case, two, moments of true transcendence that are among my favorite passages in the band's entire discography. For Need More Input, it's that first pre-chorus and it's reprised during the trumpet solo. Probably my favorite trumpet solo of their entire discography for that moment alone. And for Swarm, it's that bridge. The way this one section builds up to a stunning climax, man. The hard cut from a louder, more metal passage to nothing but strings and vocals. A moment of calm beauty in the midst of an active and almost overly busy song. The rest of the instruments slowly creeping in to start the build up proper. The percussion especially. I love the Latin flavor of the rhythm, and it keeps the busy nature of the song going throughout the bridge without making it the focus either. The third repetition where the repeated vocal mantra just fully comes to life with the whole band backing it. It's breathtaking every time. The rest of the song is admittedly not quite up to that level. The core of the song is a lot of jagged and manic guitar riffing that runs throughout pretty much every section of the song to some extent. It's one of the most consistently fast-paced songs of the band's entire discography for my money. The chorus is also solid, albeit not quite as killer as many of the ones to follow. The second verse also starts with a passage I'd say comes closest to even competing with the bridge, with a percussive atmosphere driven by a slick bass group and a more subdued vocal performance. In the solo section of this one, taking advantage of the momentum the bridge builds up, has some solid guitar work and, towards the end, some cool instrumental interplay I quite like. It's not what I'd call an absolute favorite in their discography overall, but it has that one thing that makes it stand out from an admittedly rather crowded field. And as much as I love the Hirsch Effect, I'd say the bottom of that list isn't quite as strong as the bottom of this one, or even some of the songs that just barely miss this list as well. So yeah, this song only barely cleared that bar, but it was a high bar to clear, and it's still a damn good song on the whole. This one surprised me, actually. Not that it was included, no, but that it ended up this low on the list. See, if you had asked me in 2015 what my favorite song off Maps was, most times I'd have said this one, which would make it by extension my favorite song from the band at the time. Yet, here it is, barely hanging on towards the bottom of the top 12 list 5 years later. Tastes change over time, man. Regardless, this song still has a fair few things going for it. The most obvious is that addictive, energetic chorus. On their earlier material, Thank You Scientists definitely had a bit of a pop-punk and post-hardcore lean to their sound that's kind of vanished on later albums. And the chorus here is one of the shining examples of that aspect of their sound. Other highlights include the main guitar motif running throughout the song, especially that tune-up rhythmic pattern that punctuates the riff. I also love the effortless groove of the verses quite a bit. It's a smooth but unique rhythm, such that it's easy to get into but still hits hard the 100th time you've heard it. But really, the biggest showstopper here is the instrumental section. First, the calm drum and bass driven groove to kick things off, then the smooth as silk violin solo, one of my favorites of their entire discography to this day, that escalates across its runtime and sets the stage for the trumpet and saxophone used in segment to continue that build, hitting like a truck in its back half, and the way the song carries that momentum forward into the last verse and chorus, all the way to the very, very end. It's just wonderfully executed. I don't think this one has really even faded in my mind, more that I've just come to appreciate different aspects of their sound more over the years. It hits on all three tenets of the band's sound: fun grooves, catchy hooks, and powerful climaxes. I'll bet it isn't the absolute strongest of any of those either. Just an overall very enjoyable song, and a great introduction to what the band is truly capable of. With Thank You Scientist, there are always a few tropes you can come to expect on each album. There's going to be a short intro track, the first proper track is going to be very accessible and immediately catchy, albeit not quite a highlight. Right around the midpoint of the album, there's going to be an instrumental track, and right at or near the very end, there's going to be the quote-unquote finale track. What you can expect from this track is a focus on guitars, especially the inclusion of some really noodly melody in at least a few places, a heavier than normal sound overall, and an absolutely banging chorus. And yeah, that's basically Terraformer in a nutshell. It may even be the logical extreme of all those elements. There's a manic energy running throughout this entire track, whether it be from the fast-paced leads throughout, or any of the multiple recurring riffs throughout the song, or even that gloriously over-the-top guitar solo about 2/3 of the way through the track. But where this one really shines is in its chorus, and they knew they had gold on their hands too. The chorus has a lot of ceremony surrounding it, with a great pre-chorus building up to it, and the first notes immediately hitting you over the head with the force of a hammer, and persisting like a nail stuck in your skull. Seriously, the first time I listened to this one, the "Wonder Where You Are" line was stuck in my head for like a week at least.
Wonder where you are, wonder where we're going, brightest star.
I will say that what keeps the song from being higher is that it, like many other songs off the same album, seemed just absolutely overstuffed with ideas, to the point where it blows out the song with too many musical diversions instead of getting straight to the point. It's not that the ideas themselves aren't solid on their own, just that it results in a bit of a lack of focus. I also don't think Murano's vocals here are as strong on this album as the previous two either. Those are really only minor nitpicks in what is otherwise a really fun and really memorable track though. My only other minor gripe is that the rhythm of the last quieter pre-chorus can be a bit hard to follow, but that feels like a mental hang-up more than anything. Nitpicks past this point are going to be far and few between, so let me get this out of my system now while I still have the chance. Not my favorite of their album closers, but it's still powerful as hell all the same. Speaking of album closers though, the second of the closure tracks on this list, and the first appearance of their second full-length, Stranger Heads Prevail. A lot of this one has the same appeal that Terraformer has, at least for its first half. Heavy and guitar-driven instrumentally, with a pretty strong and instantly memorable chorus. I'll bet I'd say this one's not quite as strong as Terraformer's. Where this one sets itself apart from both other songs of this type starts at about the halfway mark. The song kicks into a double-time feel with a frantic guitar riff and really active, intense drum work behind it, segueing into the bridge before kicking into a really striking electric violin solo. And then
You said I could take it or leave it. Gonna leave all this poison with you.
everything strips back for a quieter moment. A subdued instrumental palette with appropriately low-key vocal accompaniment, only to kick back in the full gear of the same mantra, and that entire backing choir of whoa-ohs that frontman Murano joins in with as they go on. All that coalescing back into the chorus, which sounds even more massive than before leading to the very manic and over-the-top guitar noodling of the outro. There's just a sense of momentum running throughout the entire back half of this song that pushes it to the next level for me, and that's on top of what was already a very good song to begin with. It's able to capitalize on its momentum in a very satisfying way, and I even quite enjoyed the brief outro track that follows it on the album, kicking off with a reprise of the song's bridge mantra. I don't really have a ton else to say about this one in particular that I didn't already say about the last song on this list though, since they both have a very similar appeal. This one just has a higher peak in my mind, and it does so with a slightly shorter runtime to boot. At the end of the day, it's just a strong finish to a strong album. Going into this list, I was worried I was going to have no representation from the band's debut EP here, since none of the songs had ever hit as hard for me as a large chunk of Maps did, even as far back as 2015 when I was first getting into their music. Thankfully, a few listens in and Gemini was able to fully quash those fears, landing comfortably on this list and growing on me a lot in the process. That debut EP, and especially this song in particular, are a bit of an oddball compared to even the album that followed it. While there's certainly prog elements here, the vast majority of this song doesn't squeeze the time signature beyond a basic 4/4, and technicality is downplayed in favor of post-hardcore energy and accessibility. And most interestingly, there's not a real chorus to this one, or nothing that I'd classify as recurrent enough to be considered the chorus. Of course, that's not necessarily a problem when the song's packed to bursting with hooks anyways. The vocal melody in the verses, and the weird robotic counterpoints to it, are as addictive as they are unsettling. I also dig the main guitar line, the violin shrieks in the closest thing to a chorus the song has, and the continuous instrumental unisons throughout. This song has some real instrumental synergy, and pretty much every instrument gets time to take center stage and really shine. It's balanced in a way that I think only their instrumental tracks have ever matched or surpassed. But really, the true centerpiece of this song starts just past the 3-minute mark. First, that jagged, aggressive, and absolutely crushing bridge, one of the heaviest moments of their entire discography for sure, followed up immediately with another killer guitar hook that takes the song through a frantic, high-energy passage, giving way to the solos. Holy hell, the solo section is something else. The chill, relaxed saxophone solo that provides a nice palate cleanser after the intense moments before. The out-of-nowhere synthesizer solo, an oddity in most of their discography, that really ramps up the energy, bringing the rest of the band with it. And the guitar solo that capitalizes on that build to really push it over the top. This is all punctuated by a moment of instrumental unison, the one really probably moment of the entire track, before things return to relative normalcy. And then, the one thing that held the song back from being even higher, the ending. It's not a complete squandering of the song's energy, but it certainly does disappoint after the soaring highs preceding it. It's not enough to ruin what came before though. This song, and really this entire EP, feel like they get overlooked in the band's catalog, and I've never seen them play anything off it live either, which really is a shame since this is excellent stuff. Sadly, the last representation of their most recent album, Terraformer, on this list, but hell if it isn't going out with a bang. A fair few tracks on this album suffer from what feels like musical bloat. Too many ideas crammed into too small of a space, with either not enough of them really hitting that hard, or not enough of them sticking around long enough to leave an impact. Life of Urban definitely has a lot of ideas, but its structure keeps it from sounding too unfocused, and it helps that the majority of those ideas are pretty dang strong. The first few minutes are kind of business as usual for the band. A verse-chorus structure with a lower-key, groovy feel to them, a pretty rhythmically strong and very busy pre-chorus segment, and a chorus that, while not especially hard-hitting on its own, caps off the small build here satisfyingly enough. It doesn't really need to be the big moment of the song though, because this song has 2 more choruses up its sleeve, and it's ready to make damn good use of them too. See, past the first few minutes, most of the rest of the song follows a palindromic structure, with none of the ideas from those first few minutes showing up throughout the rest of the song. First up is something akin to another verse and chorus pattern, with tension building in the first half and exploding to the song's loudest moment with jagged riffing and a full-force vocal delivery. I love the driving feel to this part, and following it is the one reprieve of the song, what I consider its third chorus. I'll bet here it's just a simple guitar line and more subdued vocals to give a bit of a palate cleanser before the song kicks into its wild and very proggy instrumental segment. This builds and coalesces back into the third chorus again, except this time it's going full force with the most climactic moment of the entire track.
Crazy wine tonight. The spirit's still left inside.
Rounding that out, back to the second verse chorus structure, and then the outro, which, woo boy. It's just pure instrumental madness, picking up right where the frantic feel of the chorus ends off. And remember when I said that no idea from the first few minutes shows up later? Well, that's not quite accurate, since the song ends with a slowed down, much heavier reprise of the pre-chorus riff that just picks up momentum and tempo until it reaches its breaking point. It's one hell of a rush. This song gets far more out of the Terraformer style than any other track off the album, and it genuinely pains me to have to put it this low on the list. But really, all that means is the 6 tracks above it are just as excellent, or even more so. Still a killer track though, and definitely one the band should be proud of.
You're worried now with this hurt in your hand.
Now, if you really want to talk about momentum though, woo, this song, man. This is how you do it. I know I have a tendency to just walk through songs sometimes, but I do it because sometimes you just have to really show what makes the song work as well as it does. So bear with me on this one, as we need to go on a journey here. This song starts off very unassuming, the first calm moment this album has seen in quite some time, with very simple and pleasant verses driven mostly by light guitar lines and smooth violin. There's a slow build, but nothing too significant. The first chorus hits, and we're struck with a bit more instrumental texture backing up a truly phenomenal vocal performance. Not as much a catchy hook as it is just gorgeous, really. The second verse immediately lets you know that things are only going to get more interesting from here, too. A harder hitting but not distorted guitar riff that turns into an energetic and bouncy syncopated rhythm throughout the rest of the verse, that you could probably mistake for ska out of context. The second chorus comes along, a bit more amped up than the first in all elements. I especially love the delivery of the very last line in this one.
It's you who means all the world to me.
We move on to the bridge, and the silky smooth sax solo following it, which keep that momentum going, only to pull back halfway through. And all that leads into, well, possibly the single best moment in the band's entire discography.
Waiting for someone, waiting for someone. I know we are.
I I cannot tell you just how satisfying the moment that first distorted chord hits is. The first of the entire song. It's the single moment the entire song has been building to, and it's just a phenomenal climax, with the entire band and vocals going full blast immediately after. Also gotta give a special shout out to the wailing guitar hook that follows the bridge, instantly memorable and potent as hell. And the song ends with an even larger chorus than before, just to cap things off wonderfully. It kinda surprised me at first that this song ended up as high on the list as it is, especially with how relatively straightforward it is compared to even other Map songs, but it really is just that damn good, and I kind of fell in love with it in a way I wasn't expecting to in the process of putting together this list. A fantastic example of the band using their style to drive a really strong emotive performance, with an incredibly satisfying payoff to push it over the top.
I feel like I lack the words to say. No words.
I actually don't have much to say about this song in particular, so story time! So, I first saw Thank You Scientists live back in 2015 with Coheed and Cursive. They were the opening act, and they started off their set with some staples off Maps. Not surprising since it was their only full-length album at the time. It was a fairly short set too, only 5 songs in total, but the thing I remember most was them playing a song off their then upcoming album, and I was just instantly blown away by it. So much so that the first time I actually listened to the album, I recognized it right away. The song, of course, is this one. One notable aspect of Stranger Head versus Maps that stands out is how much heavier and proggier the album is overall, and Caverns is immediately exemplary of this stylistic shift. Main motifs include guitar kneeling very reminiscent of Protest the Hero, heavy guitar riffing accompanied by the rest of the band throughout, and an absolute crusher of a chorus that hits hard even the first time you hear it. I also want to give love to a few moments in particular. First, the first pre-chorus leading up to the chorus. What a way to build up to such a powerful moment. The tension is so thick that the first distorted chord just cuts through it like a knife. And pretty much the entire long stretch after the second chorus too. The way the vibe takes a turn for the darker and more unsettling, resolving into a driving and rhythmic guitar line that bleeds into the guitar solo. The solo which, may I add, just has an absolutely beautiful climax. This song is just a great example of the band being willing to reinvent their sound without ever straying too far from what made it great in the first place. Sure, it's heavier and more manic than the last album, but the instrumental interplay and the surprising accessibility are still there and as strong as ever. And while it's maybe not quite the best example of a balls-to-walls heavy song they've put out, it's still an instant classic in their discography and deservingly one of their most popular songs to this day.
Let's call a spade and we pay for all the things we do.
What even is there to say about a song that feels like nearly every single melodic phrase or rhythmic groove is scientifically designed to be as infectious as possible? Seriously, this song is right near the pinnacle of both addictively catchy and stupidly fun in terms of their discography. I hardly even want to write about it, I just want to groove along, man. This was the band's first attempt at writing a more long-form song, which is to say, its ideas last a bit longer and there's a bit more meat in the middle than other Map songs. I'll bet it's still got a very conventional structure overall. Though that's far from a bad thing when the chorus is just so damn fun! Really, they absolutely nailed both the chorus as well as the verse, which has one of, if not the most rhythmically interesting riff in their entire discography. On top of that, there's a very distinctly Latin flavor to a lot of the instrumentation on this song, parts of it that sound like a mariachi band is performing them, especially due to the prominence of the trumpets. It's a flavor you definitely expect them to flirt with at least a little, given their instrumental ensemble, and makes this one sound almost Mars Volta-esque in those moments. And that's not to say that the instruments on this one steal the entire show here, as Morano gives a very dynamic performance, another one of his best. I'll freely admit I think he's never sounded better than he does across this entire album, probably to the deficit of later albums. The more sinister vibe with the verses, contrasted with the louder hook playing off that groovy chorus riff so damn well. But my absolute favorite vocal line has to be in the bridge.
Step at a time, know that you're mine, not to borrow.
Again, it's just so much fun to listen to, especially with that funky guitar line accompaniment. There's 2 solos on this track as well, the expected trumpet solo to play off the Latin vibe of the song, as well as the guitar solo driving the heaviest and most climactic moment of the entire track towards the end. And the ending of this one is just as strong as the rest too, with an even more amped up chorus and a reprise of the opening melody that sounds like the entire thing is falling apart at the seams in the best way possible. This song, and how well it turned out, are probably the reason the band got more comfortable with writing more long-form songs on subsequent albums, which, well, I'm not gonna say that was necessarily a great turn for them, considering that this is the longest track of theirs that made the cut for this list, but I definitely can't imagine their discography or this album without this absolute gem of a track as its centerpiece. This is probably the most theatrical a Thank You Scientist song has ever been, and it's just breathtaking, honestly, just from the very start. The slow harmonization of trumpet, sax, and strings, coalescing into a very catchy and recognizable motif. The rock instruments creeping in for the subdued verse, a bit of momentum building up without ever feeling too tense, breezy and serene, and then...
Once were meant to see the day when my lips in perfect harmony.
Yeah, the pre-chorus of this is absolutely an event unto itself, just kicking up the song to its full potential in the span of a few short seconds. And deservedly so, since this chorus is, bar none, the best in their entire discography. It just slams you in the face after a brief moment of silence, with one of the most emotive performances Murano has ever given. I genuinely cannot listen to this without singing along, and the wailing guitar loop that joins in when the vocals start taking a step back, with the trumpet and sax replacing the vocal line at the last repetition to cap things off. This song manages to do what Absentee accomplished so well in half the time, without sacrificing any of the momentum or the strength of the climax. Honestly, for all of that alone, I think the song would be topping this list if not for one thing. The middle 2 minutes are admittedly not up to par with the rest of the song. The song takes a lot of proggier instrumental diversions that, while mostly pretty catchy in their own right, feel out of place here and kind of hamper the pacing of the song a bit. Not that there's nothing in here I feel strongly about. The pick yourself up off the ground bridge is very strong, but I'm really just waiting until the next pre-chorus comes along for most of the rest of this. And like the first pre-chorus, this one also delivers, albeit in a very different way.
You may be alone, but I still feel your phone. Not afraid of open water.
Is it fair to say that the instrumental wankery was all worth it for that one moment of utter collapse? Probably not, but the song isn't content to rest on its laurels anyways, as the second chorus is very different from the first in all ways but melody. Starting off quiet to let the song take a moment of rest before kicking back into full gear. The back half of the chorus diverges as well, picking up momentum as the song moves towards its high energy outro that climaxes in a gloriously over the top finale, completing the theatrical feel of the song perfectly. This did unfortunately end up being the highest any song of the band's second album made it on this list, which means that the top two remaining tracks are both from their debut, and probably very predictable picks as well. But man, they're deserved alright. Still, that's not to diminish the strength of this song, which has comfortably been one of my favorites in their catalog since the album came out. It's just not from the album that made me fall back in love with music like the last two are.
We'll miss you, everyone. It's always fun, the times we all had.
Honestly, if you know even the tiniest bit about this band, this song probably needs no introduction. It's handily their most popular track, and their most played live as well. Can I just skip this one? I feel like this one really just speaks for itself. Let's do it anyways. Well, for one, this song is immediately striking with its iconic and fast-paced guitar tapping intro. Nothing else on Maps is even half as frantic as this song's opening measures, and the song just never lets up from there, segueing into possibly the most jagged and intimidating riff of their entire discography, manic drums and sharp horns and strings accentuating the rhythm perfectly. Even the verses, while a bit of a breather compared to the rest, are not exactly calm either. And that anthemic chorus, while yes, not quite their best in my opinion, is still instantly memorable and as powerful as you'd expect it to be for a closing track. It's kind of no wonder they frequently use this one at the end of their live set, both in just how fitting it is lyrically and how final it really does feel. I can't say enough good things about this chorus. Literally the only thing I can knock it for is not being quite as good as A Wolf in Sheep Clothing. I also love how the bridge has a bait and switch with getting genuinely calm for just a short while before slamming you over the head with the heaviest chords and darkest horns of the entire track, and the slightly off-kilter reprise of the earlier riff that follows. All that's really just setting the stage for the guitar solo though, which, well, let's face it, it's the best guitar solo and, hell, probably the best solo period in their entire discography. Honestly, picking apart all the different segments of the solo when I was charting for the aforementioned Guitar Hero project was some of the most fun I've ever had charting anything, and it helps that it's so much fun to listen to by itself. Just a great balance of tasteful and technical throughout, coalescing in a reprise of the song's main hook at the end. The song's not quite done yet though, with one more chorus, and the outro reprising the intro's guitar line and somehow making it feel even more frantic, coming to a sudden and harsh stop at the very end. It's probably the song in their discography that's the most obviously good, and probably the most influential song in the band's direction as a whole, the heavier, more guitar-driven sound being the direction they take on the next album. And on top of that, they've tried to recreate the song on each subsequent album to not quite the same success. Although it's obviously still a winning formula to follow, seeing as both those songs are also on this list. And yeah, it's deservingly their most popular song. You know what their second most popular song is, though? I really did expect this to be a tighter race between My Fame Disappearing Act and this song at the start, but nah. A listener or two in and this song had already pulled away as the obvious frontrunner of the band's entire discography. And why shouldn't it? This song exemplifies all three tenets of the band's sound that I call at the very start of this list. Absolutely fun as hell, crushingly powerful in multiple places, and an absolute earworm in every aspect. Let's start with the first of those, the fun factor. I mean, just listen to the first verse. Enough said there, really. Both verses of this, as well as the pre-chorus, have very obviously bouncy and infectious grooves, but it's running through more than just those moments. The chorus, which incidentally ticks off all three tenets by itself, has a great drum and bass groove behind it that makes it as fun as it is addictive. And even the main instrumental motif injects a bit of a groovy break before the verse starts. And the heavy and emotive moments, well, for one, let's stick to that instrumental motif for a bit. It's jagged and it's powerful, with wailing trumpets and sax driving a dark cabaret sound. And of course, the chorus itself, with a very driving guitar line on top of the aforementioned grooves, and a passionate delivery from Morano on top of it. But the absolute highlight of the entire track has to be the bridge.
Feed your horses, and I'll be sure to find the fire behind your eyes.
The instruments cut back for a very somber and kind of uncomfortable moment, only for the song to take that melody and push it into a driving, intense groove that builds to probably the most impactful moment in the band's entire discography, one I doubt they'll ever be able to top. It kind of just leaves me breathless every time. No less for the fact that I have no choice but to belt those lines at the top of my lungs every time I hear it. Cause yeah, for as powerful as the bridge is, and the chorus as well, they're also just maddeningly catchy, as is that main motif. All it really takes is 2 or 3 good hooks for a song to really let itself in your brain, and this song has some of their absolute best. It's just a complete thank you sign at this package, at least for me. Yeah, sure, it's one of their few songs that doesn't feature a single solo, or even anything resembling an extended instrumental break, but it hardly needed one, and it's still got tons of excellent instrumental interplay throughout regardless. I can't imagine any way this song could possibly be improved, honestly. It's easily my favorite thing this band has ever put out, and it sets the bar phenomenally high for them to try and surpass it in the future. And that's that for another list. I was honestly worried at first that I'd have a hard time putting this list together, in part because of how high this band has set the standard for even their average song, and worrying that I wouldn't have enough to say about each individual song. But with how long I've blabbed on about each of these tracks, and how much fun I had putting this list together, I can safely say those feelings were not justified even in the slightest bit. I absolutely love this band, and even if I don't think their latest work has quite matched their debut, that's an almost insurmountable peak to surpass anyways. And everything they put out has still been damn great. I genuinely can't say I dislike even a single song they released so far, even the weakest ones in their catalog. And considering I still need to get that 2019 albums video out now, yeah, expect to hear more about them then. Until then though, take care y'all.